Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's honestly a bit terrifying: the rapid, real-world weaponization of our global supply chains. As we look through the lens of a 2-year retrospective on Harshal Priyavardhan Patel's supply chain attack vector, we aren't just going to admire the problem. We're going to break down a structural cure. We'll be doing a deep dive into his accountability-gated systems, which is a unified architecture designed to fundamentally rethink how machines actually hold power.
Here's what we're covering today. First, we'll look at weaponizing the supply chain, then infiltration and brand hijacking. After that, we'll map out the decentralized threat landscape before digging into the structural cure, Harshal's accountability-gated systems. Finally, we'll cover enforcing structural passivity and what the future of accountability actually looks like. Let's get into it.
All right, part 1, weaponizing the supply chain.
So what actually happens when the devices we use every single day are secretly turned into weapons? I mean, we've all seen the news lately, right? Look at the recent incidents in Lebanon with pagers and walkie-talkies. Utterly ordinary, seemingly harmless communication tech was quite literally transformed into tools of mass disruption. It proved this incredibly chilling concept. Consumer electronics can be completely weaponized way before you ever even take them out of the box.
And this really highlights the two distinct halves of how these compromises start. See, an attack can be entirely digital. Think cyber sabotage, where someone sneaks malicious code right into a device's firmware so they can control it remotely later. Or it can be physical sabotage. That's where harmful components or even explosive materials are discreetly slipped in during the actual manufacturing process. And honestly, it's often a devastating mix of both, fundamentally changing the hardware and the software before it ever reaches your hands.
Which brings us to Section 2. Infiltration and brand hijacking.
You're probably wondering, how on earth do these rigged devices make it into our homes and businesses without anyone noticing? Well, the infiltration relies heavily on exploiting our trust. First, attackers hijack a brand. They might partner with shady distributors or just pump out highly convincing counterfeits. Next, they seamlessly slip these items right into normal commercial retail channels. Because they look and act exactly like the real thing, they completely bypass traditional security. And then, the attackers just wait. They sit back and wait to send that remote activation signal.
And here is where it gets wild. To trigger that hidden payload, they don't even need the device to be connected to traditional Wi-Fi. Attackers are exploiting a massive variety of tech. We're talking everyday elements, a simple RF signal, standard cellular networks, or even something as innocent as plugging in a standard HDMI cable can act as the activation switch. It totally blurs the line between what's online and offline, meaning practically any device sitting in your room right now could be harboring a dormant threat.
Let's expand on that in Section 3, a decentralized threat landscape.
Because this attack surface, it is entirely decentralized now. We aren't just talking about pagers and phones anymore. It's everything. The smart appliances sitting in your kitchen, the heavily networked car sitting in your driveway, even critical life-saving tech like pacemakers and insulin pumps, or the massive industrial equipment powering our cities. Every single one of these decentralized nodes is a potential target, just waiting for remote weaponization.
The real danger we're facing here is a massive domino effect. If a bad actor manages to compromise a foundational chip manufacturer or a printed circuit board supplier, that infection ripples outward in every direction. Just one single point of compromise way down at the hardware level can create a catastrophic, decentralized web of targets nested deep inside our global infrastructure.
Okay, let's pivot to the solution. Section 4, Harshal's accountability-gated systems.
Facing a threat this massive and, frankly, this hidden, we can't just keep relying on reactive software patches. We need a structural cure, and that's exactly what Harshal's accountability-gated systems, or AGS, provides. This architecture completely flips the script on how we build tech. Instead of building AI or hardware that constantly tries to gain more autonomy, AGS demands that responsibility must structurally precede power, meaning a machine can never, ever initiate an action unless a verified human takes responsibility for it first. Under this framework, a system's highest expression of intelligence isn't taking autonomous action, it's its structural capacity to actually refuse action.
AGS maps this out using the ground zero phase model, which categorizes systems based purely on their observable behavior. It starts with the ICE state, formerly known as the Neural Atomic Body, or NAB. Think of this as a structurally passive system. It is strictly refusal-bound, meaning it requires a fresh, verified pulse of external legitimacy directly from a human origin for every single action it takes. No pulse, no action.
Moving up, we have the water state, known as the Custodial Witness Orb, or CWO. This state is strictly forbidden from executing any commands whatsoever. Its one and only job is to remember faithfully, to just observe, record, and preserve immutable logs. It's built specifically to ensure that the memory of a system never inadvertently morphs into the authority to act.
Finally, we reach the mist state, the God Sovereign Religious Body, or GSRB. This represents a fully autonomous acting center. Its commands trigger actual real-world movement without needing to stop and check for external advice. But here is the genius part of Harshall's framework. It includes something called forced rebadging. If a system claims to just be an advisory body, but it's secretly executing binding commands in the background, the architecture forces it to wear this GSRB badge. It drags that hidden sovereign power right out into the light for everyone to see.
So, how do we apply this? Section 5. Enforcing structural passivity.
To actually block the insidious supply chain attacks we talked about earlier, we absolutely have to enforce structural passivity across the board. The sources use this brilliant biological metaphor for it, the tethered limb analog. Think about it. Your arm cannot physically move without a direct neural signal from your brain, right? Well, a device built on this AGS framework acts the exact same way. It is structurally incapable of executing some invisible malicious command because it literally lacks the verified human pulse, the keyholder coupling it needs to move. It's completely dead in the water without you.
And this is precisely why Harshall's Orb Communicator Model, or OCM, is such a game changer for system security. If you look at traditional peer-to-peer models, authority is fragmented, it's delegated out, and can easily hide in the shadows. But the OCM demands a single, immutable origin of authority. It uses what's called a radiative geometry. By forcing everything to attach directly back to one single human origin, the kind of covert lateral coordination that supply chain attackers rely on becomes geometrically impossible.
It also totally changes how these systems handle a crisis. You know how traditional autonomous AI usually tries to solve a problem by granting itself more independence to keep performance up? Yeah, accountability-gated control logic does the exact opposite. It intentionally contracts. If a device is compromised, or if it just loses that human link, legitimate operation is structurally prohibited. The system decides that it is way better to stop correctly than to persist incorrectly.
Let's wrap it up with Section 6, the future of accountability.
So what does this radical level of accountability mean for our future? Well, it achieves something called adversarial durability by adopting the tardigrade standard for resilience. If a supply chain attack is triggered, or honestly, if there's even a slight ambiguity or loss of that human pulse, the system does not go rogue. Instead, it enters cryptobiosis. It drops into a non-operational failure mode. The system just halts instantly, freezing its internal state and preserving all its immutable logs, safely waiting until its true human origin returns.
When you take these principles, structural passivity and single origin authority, and scale them up, you get what is called the Empire Grid. It's this massive distributed network that functions purely as a high-fidelity structural extension of your intent. Because the entire grid is geometrically bound directly to you as the origin, it creates an incredibly stable volume, one that is completely immune to decentralized sabotage or sneaky lateral commands from bad actors.
As we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought, especially considering the very real, very terrifying threats lurking in our modern hardware. Based on what we've unpacked today, I want you to really ask yourself, are the devices you rely on every single day truly structurally passive, or are they hiding sovereign power that could be turned against you in an instant? Seriously, who is truly holding the power over the technology in your pocket?